The Consulting Success podcast is powered by the Clarity Coaching Program. If you'd like to work directly with the Consulting Success team and receive personal coaching and support to optimize and grow your consulting business, marketing, and revenue, visit consultingsuccess.com to find out more and apply.
Welcome to the Consulting Success Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Zapersky. In this podcast, we'll dive deep into the world of elite consultants, where you'll learn the strategies, tactics, and mindset to grow a highly profitable and successful consulting business.
Hey everyone, it's Michael Zapersky, and today I'm here with Gisele Garcia Shelley. Gisele, welcome.
Thank you. So glad to be here.
Yes, so Gisele, you are an executive coach for senior leaders and their teams. You're the principal of the Glenbrook Group, which you've been running since 2001. So that's fantastic. And you work with companies all over the globe, focusing on fast-growing mid-sized businesses and the Fortune 500. Besides that, you also serve and work as kind of a keynote speaker, panelist, research, and facilitator. So you're doing a lot of different things, which we want to get into. But where I'd love to kind of start today is your background. You have a Bachelor of Arts in History and French. So how did you go from a Bachelor of Arts in History and French to where you are today? Just kind of tell us, what was the transition, or what did it look like from the time that you kind of got your bachelor getting into kind of the consulting world?
Right. Thank you, Michael. So just to give you like a couple of bullets, I lived in Europe, what would have been my senior year in high school. And I remember thinking, with all hubris aside, that I came up with the best idea possible that nobody else was doing, that I was going to grow up and be one of these people who helps people communicate cross-culturally. And I was convinced that nobody had done that before. So that was the context I went into college with. The context that I got out of college with, and I lived again abroad in college, is that I came out of at a school in a recession. And there were, it was like 3,000 people were applying for 2 positions and so forth. And so I ended up and for people who know me, they would laugh, as a compensation analyst for an insurance company in New York, which is very different from who I am and what I tend to do. And I got a job. So what I found, though, is that there were these renegade women in long flowing skirts who were doing this thing called organizational development. They were working with teams. They were coaching executives at this company I was working at, and they were making just enough money that the company couldn't shut them down, but not enough money that it was something that they said was one of the key pillars of what they did. Fast forward today, that company has been sold, and that is the core element of what that company specializes in, is what those very forward-thinking women were doing back in the 90s when I was working with them. So they were the ones who, I believe that it's really important for people to have sponsors and mentors and just surround themselves with those. And so when there wasn't much work as a compensation analyst in the insurance industry, I started being the intern briefcase handler. I'll do anything extra for you, and started accompanying them on incredible work. And that's where I got into, from history and French into the work that I do today.
Talk to me for a minute about, you mentioned like that early mindset or belief around cross-cultural, and that you would be this kind of connector, helping maybe European companies, brands, people maybe to enter the American market. I don't know, is that like what you were thinking, as kind of Europe to US type of connection, or?
Who knows? I think I realized, and especially living as an American abroad, that, and I had friends who, many of them spoke English and their families did not. They're all the older people. And so I just started looking at how people communicate, and that the likelihood that what I'm saying is what you're hearing is actually very, very challenging. And so I started just noticing and being a real studier of individuals and groups and how they connect. And so I didn't realize it at the time. But when I got into grad school and started really studying group dynamics and, the whole practitioner piece of being an organizational development person, that's where it all kind of started to come together.
Well, how much of that do you think, like that kind of curiosity and interest, do you think actually plays or played a role in your success? And I'm asking because, and still to this day, I think have a very similar mindset. Like, went over to Japan, I kind of set up one of the branch offices for our consulting business at that time. We worked with some really big organizations over there. And that was really like kind of the advantage that we were bringing, is we were working with Japanese companies that wanted to get their products and services into North American markets, or in the case like, for example, Panasonic, they were already there, but they want to launch new products or be more successful. And so we were helping them with that. But I was this pretty naive 20-something-year-old kid, or young man, applying, what I thought I knew and kind of what I had learned. But I think that what ultimately helped, myself and the company to be successful was exactly that curiosity that I had, and really like listening to people and studying them. And I'm wondering if you feel that was also something that, if you look at where you are today, kind of influenced your success, or was that just a little floating idea that didn't really, take you anywhere?
100%. Right. So curiosity is and in the work I do to build high-performing leaders, there are two foundational behaviors, one of which is very difficult for leaders to consistently demonstrate and emulate. And that's curiosity, receptivity, especially not so much when you're saying something I agree with, but mostly when you're saying something I don't agree with. So the level of curiosity, and, people talk about growth mindset, interest. I think the other concept is, it sounds like in your example that you were willing to not be right, which is, again, a lot that a lot of people are not willing to do. It's like, I'm not saying I'm right, and I'm even getting curious about what I don't know, I don't even know. And I think that's what happens. I don't think you have to travel to have that mindset. I think travel, and I know it's hard to talk about travel in a pandemic, I think that's one of the ways that we can get outside of ourselves and really take on some of these behaviors that coaches as well as leaders now leading through a pandemic. If you pretend like you have any answers, then there's nothing that you'll be able to do. I think that's been one of the powerful things of the pandemic, is everybody has said, we don't know what we don't know because we've never been in this. And that's been one of the beauties, I think, of that.
I think about a lot of consultants who probably are in situations where they're talking to clients or prospective clients, and they don't actually see eye to eye with them. And especially in the case where the client maybe says they want to do something or they don't want to do something, and the consultant is afraid inside, there's fear that if they say something to the client that maybe the client doesn't agree with, that might not look good upon them, or the client might get angry, or they're going to lose the business. But what I'm also hearing you say is, like, another way to look at it is potentially not about that you're going against what they're saying or actually disagreeing. It's more kind of bringing some curiosity. I wonder if you have any feedback on what consultants should be thinking and doing when they are speaking with either a prospective client or an existing client, and they don't see eye to eye with them, and they truly want to add value and serve, but they are afraid, or they're conscious of that they don't want to step on their clients' toes or go against them. What are your thoughts or some best practices around that?
Sure. I can't actually even think very clearly of many clients who ask for what they actually need. They say, oh, well, I want this, or I want my team intervention to look like that. And with all due respect, well over 98% of the time, what they're asking for is not what they need. And so the fear that you're talking about is, I relate to it, especially in the earlier part of my career, of wanting to do things right and wanting them to like me. And when I let go of all of that, that's where I started getting really effective. I have to say is that, in fact, recently I had a CEO hire me because he said I was the only person who actually told him the truth. He had interviewed for 2 years. He's been looking for a coach. And he called all these very fancy, high-priced, experienced coaches. And he's a big personality. He's well-known in the marketplace. And they kept telling him what he wanted to hear. And when I didn't, and I went so far as he even sent me an email that he sent to his team. And I looked at the email and I said, can I offer you some observations about how you might have tweaked it 10%? And I gave him the feedback on the email, and I gave him feedback when we were talking about just like, have you thought about this? And that's why he hired me. So I think it's really important for coaches and leaders. It's not that there's not a humility, right? So it's a fine line. It's a tightrope between humility if I don't have all the answers, and I'm not saying I'm right, and what you're asking for may or may not be. It's usually like the iceberg above the waterline. They're getting 15%, and there's the 85% below the waterline they're not seeing. So I think it's imperative that we stay and we keep gathering more data so that we can respond to what they actually need and then coach them to get there.
Can you give an example or two of, you mentioned that you yourself went through this in the early years. It was much harder to kind of give that transparent feedback or say, hey, like what you're asking for isn't actually what you need. What did you do to start shifting that? What changes did you make either in your mindset, or I'd love to hear maybe like some specific talking points or language or actions that you started to use that helped you to make that shift where you became more confident and ultimately that helped your business?
While we work with a lot of seasoned and experienced consultants here at Consulting Success, I'm often contacted by new early stage consultants. Invariably, the question I'm asked is, what are the steps I should take to become a successful consultant and grow my consulting business to my first 6 figures per year? Well, I'm excited to announce that we've opened the doors for our Momentum program. This is our most popular program for early stage consultants, and it has helped almost 1,000 consultants to start, run, and grow successful consulting businesses. It gives you the step-by-step plan to help you with your messaging, your fees, and pricing strategies, how to win more proposals, how to go to market more effectively, developing a marketing system to generate leads consistently, and so much more. And right now, until September the 19th, you can sign up for Momentum and get 50% off the regular price by going to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO. Only 100 spots are available to join Momentum and get 50% off. This deal is only available until September the 19th or until all 100 spots are gone. We won't be opening up new spots in this program for several months, so don't wait. Go to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO.
Yeah. Well, I work in 3 areas. I do one-on-one executive coaching. I help build high-performing, inclusive executive leadership teams. And the third area is around women's leadership, which is a bold leadership program for women. And I conducted some research around what are the biggest challenges that get in women leaders' way. And I am going to answer your question. I'm just giving you the context. And there were 2 main answers. Myself was the first answer, and the organization and bias and so forth is the second answer. Of the first answer of how I get in my own way, self-doubt was number 1, like imposter syndrome for the majority of everybody who answered the questions. And people always ask me, well, do men experience imposter syndrome the way women do, right? So I'm gonna interrupt myself and ask you, have you ever experienced self-doubt? Have you ever experienced like, what will they think? I'm not really sure. Have you ever had that?
I can't compare and say that I know what a woman, feels, but I can tell you 100% that I have had it. And I think every single successful person that I've ever spoken to has experienced it, and not just once, but multiple times as they, reach different levels. Because if you're going to be successful, you're going to be continually growing and challenging yourself, which means you're going to be questioning yourself throughout that process.
Exactly, like on the nose. So the data suggests that 70% of the population experiences imposter syndrome. I'm with you. I think that of high-performing, inspiring leaders, it's almost a version of 100%. It may occur differently in women, and we could go into the differences between men and women, but the bottom line, regardless of gender, is that there are, and I write a lot about and I talk about the vicious voices that are running the show, right? So if you're feeling doubt about telling the CEO of this big company who has all of this brand recognition in the marketplace, that you actually have some feedback for him, or you think that in fact, this client did ask me, he said, I would like you to do, he said, what do you recommend? And I said, I recommend we start with executive coaching. And he said, well, I would like to do the team alignment work as well. And I said, not yet. I think we need to start with the coaching, and then we'll check in after about 3 months and we'll see where we're at for when your team is ready. I think we need to stagger it. And he said, okay. So at some level, it would be easy for me to listen to the vicious voices. And I do a lot of work around teaching people how to turn down the volume of the self-doubt critic and how to turn up the volume of the other voices. So I think that's one talking point, is just being aware of like who you're listening to.
Yeah.
Being careful not to believe everything you think. And number 2 is to be willing to step out of your comfort zone and to identify. And I have a lot of practices and processes that I do to coach clients and for myself to jump out of my comfort zone in order to do that. And even if I'm a little bit nervous, if I know that the right answer, if I truly believe in my gut that what this person needs is this and not that, then I'm going to have to say it. In 6 words that changed my life when my mother told me them in 8th grade is like, what have you got to lose? So what have you got to lose? So if you're willing to not listen to your voices or listen to the right voices, if you're willing to step out of your comfort zone, and if you're willing to say, look, if I put myself out there and trust that I'm saying the right thing and this person says, heck no, I still want to do this, then do I really have a client? Because in preparing for today, I wrote down a couple of best practices. And one of them is that I work with people that I like and that I can align with, and that we have a simpatico and can create a partnership. And if I'm saying this and they're saying no, then there's data in there of, do I actually even want to be working with this person?
Yeah, I think that's so important. Like just before you're jumping on, I was speaking with one of our Clarity Coaching Program clients, and his business is going really well. Things have been taking off for him. He's not in a position where he needs new clients today or even probably for a few months. But what he's realized, and this is becoming very clear in the conversation, is that there's certain types of clients and certain type of work that he's not enjoying as much as maybe he used to anymore. And he's started to identify that there's a certain type of client at a specific stage that does create a lot more excitement and fulfillment for him. So we talked about the importance of, you want to start making that shift and focusing and getting clear on your criteria, so that as you have new opportunities coming to you, that you're really saying yes to only the ones that are the right fit, or you get clear about what is the structure of how you engage and you don't deviate from that. So either the client needs to fit into your structure, right? Or you're essentially ensuring that you're only taking on the clients that you feel good about, because you don't want, as you said, to take on a client or an engagement that you're not going to enjoy, you're not going to have the culture or the value alignment, because you'll probably look back and regret that. So I think that's really good advice.
Yeah. And a way to operationalize that somatically, and to embody it, is to remember that inspiration comes from spiro, to breathe life into. So with any request, with any task that you're doing, you're either breathing life into yourself or you're doing the opposite, right? You're sucking it out of. And so everybody knows that there are clients that you get the email and you're so excited, you'd wake up on a Saturday morning to start working on it. You'd actually do it for half the price that you even negotiated, because you're so excited about those clients. And there are other clients, and I certainly have had my fair share, where they paid me a boatload of money and it has just been like, oh God, I got to talk to this guy again.
Yeah.
When you've been doing this long enough, you can kind of start to differentiate what inspires me and what is better for me to send off to somebody else.
Hey, it's Michael here, and we'll be right back to the podcast. But first, are you ready to grow, scale, and take your consulting business and marketing to the next level? If so, our Clarity Coaching Program may be a great fit for you. You'll work with our experienced team to set up a strategic plan for your business and coach you step by step in areas like how to consistently attract more leads, develop a magnetic message that resonates with your ideal clients, strategically package and position your services, earn higher fees, win more proposals, and scale your business. To find out more about Clarity Coaching and apply, go to consultingsuccess.com and click on coaching.
Let's shift gears for a minute here. I'd love to hear, because clearly, you built up a successful business here, Gisele, and I'm sure people are wondering, how did you go about doing that? So when you kind of look back on everything you've done from, writing, speaking, doing studies and collecting, research data, all that kind of stuff, what would you say has contributed the most, or what are maybe the top couple of actions or strategies or tactics you would say have been most beneficial and helpful and effective in generating new leads and inquiries of your true ideal client?
Right. So a couple things. So one is a great exercise that I did, and I recommended it to a number of people, and they said, wow, Gisele, that was a lot of work. I said, yeah, it was a lot of work. I think if I had to pick one, and there have been several, it's that I went through this process. And when I worked at Merrill Lynch, I was the internal head of benchmarking at the time, long time ago. And so I've always been interested in benchmarking and interviewing people. And that is like one of the relevancies of being a history major. Right? It's like, why liberal arts? It's because it's like synthesizing information, writing about it. And so I started to do a benchmarking study, as I mentioned, on the challenges women leaders face. And I interviewed 3 different demographics: women leaders, male executives, and HR professionals. And I asked them all the same questions. And my original target was 10 people, and I ended up interviewing over 50 because the interviews were so interesting and so helpful to me. And then my last question I asked in every interview was, what's the biggest takeaway, the most useful takeaway you've had from this conversation? And every interview that I had, they took something away too. So it's really a win-win. And then I wrote up that benchmarking study, and it's on my website. And what it did is it allowed me to not only see what the gap is, but I also was able to take all the years of 20 plus years of consulting and coaching and create what I call the bold leadership framework for leadership. And I took everything I'd already been doing and started to organize it into this bold context. So it's not that if I were coaching you as a one-on-one male executive, I would still be using the same tools and models and mindset work that I do with a group of women leaders. It's not like it's different content. It's just a totally different delivery mechanism. So I did the research, I came up with the model, and then I went back to the people that I interviewed, not all of them, most of them, and walked them through the data and got their feedback on that. And in that process, I was then able to start to really get very clear on my ideal client, which I struggled with. Because the good news about being sort of multidimensional is also the biggest challenge, because it's very hard to focus and find a niche. I struggled with that for a long time. And so that study helped me. And then I got my first keynote. And then that's where all the speaking started coming from. And speaking is like a snowball. Once you speak once, then other people start finding you.
Quick question for you on this. So I understand you're having these interviews, conversations, you're collecting the data. That's helping you to identify opportunities and, kind of the gap in the marketplace, which then lets you get clear about who your ideal client is. How does that then lead to your first client? I mean, was it one of the people that you spoke to was then someone said, hey, can you come and speak to our group?
Yeah.
Okay. So it was actually from one of the conversations that you had that created an opportunity for you. And were there others of that kind of initial group of 50 that said to you, hey, can you coach us or work with us on these things as you were going through the data with them?
Yeah. I mean, I've never had to market. I always say we don't market, we tell the truth. Like back to your point about being willing to say the thing. And I could have gone back to a lot more people and developed probably a lot more work. I had so much work that it was harder for me to keep up with all the people who want to talk.
But how did that work come? Was it just from the conversations you were having and taking those same 50 people through the data? Or where were the clients coming from?
I always had a lot of clients that were mostly clients for me or referral. So I stay very connected. I think a lot of coaches get in a 6-month, 12-month mindset. And I think we're partners for life. And I'm not one of those coaches, by the way, who gets a badge and shows up for 3 years and feels like I'm an employee at a company. I do stay connected though. If we do really great work in a short period of time, and then we end, and then they get a promotion, and then they call me, or they get let go, and then they call me, and I help them and I coach them through that time. Or somebody from a team goes to another company and they call. So I think the referral piece is key, and the people within the benchmarking study. I think they're also, you can tell who's really lit up. And at the end of many conversations, they said, oh, I want you to come, when you're done with your research, come speak about this. So I think it's very imperative for coaches to also, who want to never really market, to become very good speakers. And you can be a great speaker virtually. You don't have to only have a live platform. So I took a class that was incredibly powerful, and I learned kind of the secret of how do you really run a session that just inspires people. And so it's not that hard. There are a couple of secrets, but it's not that hard. And so if you're really good speaking, then you can connect back in with the people who you interviewed and so forth.
Yeah, and I think for any expert, any advisor, consultant, coach, development of content and sharing of ideas, whether that's through webinars, in person, writing books. I mean, these are all very powerful kind of steps to take to build that authority and ultimately to create a lot more business. How did you get those first 50 people? Was it just people that you already knew? Did you ask for referrals to reach those people? Did you reach out cold to any people? What did that process look like?
Yes. So I started, and again, it's about jumping out of your comfort zone, right? So the first conversation I had, I didn't even know what my questions were. And I picked a very safe client who I remember exactly where I was. I was at Newark Airport and he was flying in. He's already a client of mine. And I started with 2 questions. And then by the end of the hour, I had asked him about 10 questions. And then I asked him, do you have anybody else you think who would be useful for me to talk to? And at the time he said no. And so I thought of other clients. So I started with people who were safe people that I just knew in my network. I have a colleague who I suggested he do this process, and he started with his best friend's brother who worked at a company that was in line with his values, and he'd been wanting to work at this company. And he said, who do I know? Oh, well, Curtis's brother works there, so therefore I'm going to talk to him. So you don't have to have a list of 50 people. Again, my target list was 10. I started with 3 to 5. And at the end of every conversation, I said, what was the most useful takeaway for you about this conversation? And can you recommend somebody else for me to talk to? And it was just like this snowball process.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. So I think, Gisele, I haven't even scratched the surface of the question that I had here for you today, because we just kept going deeper and deeper into these other areas. But I think you've shared some really powerful principles for people. And, this idea of imposter syndrome and not being afraid to confront or challenge something that maybe you don't agree with for the betterment and service of your client or those in the community that you're serving. I mean, these are all really important lessons. This idea of, and essentially acceptance that when you bring a lot to the table, it's hard to find that area of specialization. Like we see so many of our clients go through this as well, where they bring so much to the table. It's like, and it's counterintuitive because most people start thinking, if I say no to all these other areas, only focus on 1 or 2, like, doesn't that mean that I'm going to have less opportunities? But it's actually the exact opposite, right? By getting more focused, it allows you to make everything more effective and more efficient because you're not juggling as many balls at one time. But before we wrap up today, I want to make sure that people can learn more about your study that you've done and just learn more about your work, because I think there's a lot that you have to offer, and maybe we'll have to look at doing another round here where we can go into other questions that I had for you around leadership and productization, or productivity, I should say, and just, performance, because that's the area that you really do specialize in. So to start off though, let's make sure that people can find you and your work. Where's the best place for them to go? I just put it in chat. Okay. So, I don't know if you can use chat on this. GlenbrookGroup.com. Yeah. Okay. So yes, for everyone to go to, theglenbrookgroup.com. We'll have that linked up in the show notes. And then, recommend that everyone goes and checks out Gisele and her company and the work that they're doing and the studies and content that they're putting out, because it really does look to be very valuable. And I think regardless of whether you consider yourself to be an executive coach, a consultant, an advisor, a strategic thinking partner, there's a lot of value in here, I think, for many of us. So I want to thank you, Gisele, so much for coming on here today, sharing a little bit of your story and kind of lessons learned along the way. So thanks so much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Success Podcast. For more episodes and to subscribe, rate, and leave a review, head on over to iTunes. And if you'd like to develop consistent lead flow and a highly profitable consulting business, learn more about our coaching programs at consultingsuccess.com.